there's plenty. And if we can just let go and release the fear and that scarcity, all of a sudden we realize how much is out there and how many people we can help in different ways.
This is Therapist Clubhouse, a podcast for private practice entrepreneurs. I'm Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Allison Puryear, who helps therapists build abundant practices through abundancepracticebuilding.com and hosts a podcast called Abundant Practice Podcast. In this conversation, we get real about balancing parenting with business, building a practice using your strengths, and embracing a mindset of abundance. So, Allison, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to talk to you about your whole entrepreneurial journey, which I realize is a much longer conversation potentially. But so just like me, you have two businesses. And I want to start by jumping in, talking about your therapy practice. So how long have you been in private practice and who do you love to work with the most?
So I've been in private practice for 11 or 12 years. I've kind of lost track. LinkedIn lets me know once a year. And I'm like, okay, good to know. So I've been in private practice for, I guess, a little over a decade, we'll say. And I love working with women in their 20s who are struggling with eating disorders and anxiety. That's just like, fills me up. I love it.
Oh, beautiful. And how did you choose your niche? Was it a clear path or a twisty path?
It was a very clear path. It's maybe a weakness that I'm so decisive. So I decided that I wanted to be a therapist when I was 11, despite not knowing what any therapists and having never been to therapy myself. I just thought that would be it. And then struggled a lot through adolescence in my early 20s with an eating disorder and depression and anxiety. And I had this moment in recovery. I think I was probably starting to cross over the line from being in recovery to recovered, where I was like, oh my God, this is possible for life. Like, I didn't know it was possible to enjoy my life like this. And that's when I was like, I got to help other people. Like, I understand this pain and also what's possible when you come out of it, that like, I got to help the other people. So, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. It made it a lot easier than a lot of my friends who were like, I don't know what I want to be when I would grow up. And I was like, I already decided when I was 11. So, you know.
That's great. So you are very decisive. Are you a J on the Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, I'm moving a little closer to the middle than I once was because my husband was a hardcore P when we met. And so we're both kind of like moving slightly closer together because it's been an interesting thing in our relationship.
What are the other, I'm now just really curious. What are the other letters for you?
I'm an ENFJ.
ENFJ.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm an INFJ.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yay. So you'll need a break from me, but otherwise we're cool.
No, I mean, I've got everything scheduled perfectly. So that is great. So you got your niche figured out, and was it ever scary in the beginning to go after your niche and to be really clear about who you wanted to work with?
So it wasn't scary around the niche. For me, so after undergrad, I moved down to South Florida and worked for an inpatient eating disorder or I guess like a residential eating disorder recovery center. And so I got my feet wet as a psych tech where I was allowed to do groups and things like that, which was pretty cool. And I don't know how it was legal, but we won't tell on them. But I got my feet wet in a way that made me feel really ready for grad school sooner than I'd expected, and was really excited about being able to, do it as a counselor instead of as a psych tech. And then the niche part, just the more I learn about, I love the personality characteristics that tend to go with folks with eating disorders. So for a lot of us, our niche is very much related to a person we once were. And so while there are things that they struggle with that I still struggle with, like rigidity, for instance, like the decisiveness, I'm able to really I know that about myself in a way that I can change things and I can be more flexible, and happen to marry a really flexible partner. And that helps things too, because I, he's kind of my role model for the spontaneity thing. But it's just really interesting how the niche part wasn't hard, but a lot of the other stuff was.
Yeah. So tell me about what was scary, what was hard.
Well, when I was in agencies and working for other people, toxic work environments were really hard. I just had really bad luck, I think, with the places where I worked. And I think a lot of us do. And I think there's this misconception that if you're a therapist and you're good with people, you'll also be a great manager. And it's such a totally different skill set. So I think I had bad luck just in the places that I landed. And then when I decided to go out on my own, like the first time I opened a private practice, I did it when I had moved across the country to a new city as like what I was doing. I didn't get an agency job when we moved. My husband was in school, so he wasn't going to be able to bring in any money. And I was like, all right, I hope this works. So and it was a bigger city. I moved to Seattle and had been living in like a small college town. So it was a leap of faith. It was a scary, scary leap of faith. And there were a lot of moments of sitting in my living room on the floor, just crying because I wasn't sure. Like there weren't practice builders out there like there are now. There were a couple, but it was mainly like their books, Yes. So I didn't have anybody saying, oh no, this is totally doable. Like this is how you do it.
Yeah. We're sitting there like clinging to like Lynn Grodsky's book.
Yes. Like wiping my tears with Casey Truffaut's book.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Bless them. So, yes.
I know. Thank God they walked the path before we did.
Yeah.
But that interaction, I didn't have a community of people. That's another reason I'm so huge on community, is I didn't have other people going through it at the same time that could buoy me when I needed it and that I could buoy when they needed it.
Yeah. And it's making me think too, Allison, that even though you said you were not lucky with your positions in agencies, I think there's this weird way that it kind of is lucky that didn't work out. Because it made it really clear that private practice was going to be a better fit for you.
Yeah, because I'm a very easily managed person. Like I really want to work hard and do well. And so I could have, if I'd been in a good agency, I could have stayed there forever. And it would have been a different life than what I get to have now.
Yeah. Oh my God, we're so similar in that way. Yeah. I always wanted to be no trouble to whoever was my boss. So that was this like scary time of trying to figure out like, how the hell do I do this business thing? And then at that point, so you had like the help of just, the books and the distant role models, but how did you make it work at that point?
I think looking back now, I think intuitively I knew that as an outgoing extrovert and as somebody who had a lot of relationships in my former community, and I'd had a part-time practice in my former community too, I knew that the relationships are what had gotten me clients in my little part-time practice. And I didn't ever have to work at anything. So I also hadn't flexed any of those marketing muscles at all until I got to Seattle. And so I just networked like crazy. And whenever I talk to introverts about this, I watch them cringe, and this is not something I recommend for anybody who's not an outgoing extrovert in a new city who has no friends yet. But I networked with 90 people in 90 days. I just like set this goal and I had them set up before I even moved, like the first couple weeks of them.
Yes.
Just like networked like a crazy person, which was great because I got to know the city, because I'd be like, I'll come to you. And I got to meet all sorts of amazing people, many of whom are still really, really close friends. So it didn't just help me build my business. It also helped me build my community.
I love that. And even though, like as an introvert, that would probably kill me.
Yeah.
It would, there's a modified version of that I think would work for everybody, whether it's like, 30 meetings in 90 days, or also applying other kinds of really great marketing activities to a 90-day plan. I love that because it's so active and it's so taking it into your own hands.
Yeah, it just brings an intentionality to every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, I need that because I'd always worked either two jobs or, an over 40-hour a week job my whole adult life. And so going from having a full 45 hours a week job plus a part-time private practice to wide open days, I was kind of like, what do I do?
So you gave yourself a job.
Yeah, totally.
Immediately. And so your consulting business is called Abundance Practice Building. When did abundance become a big theme for you in your business, in your life, or in everything?
I think when my practice took off in Seattle, I started trying to, I was like a proselytizer for private practice amongst all my counselor friends across the country. And I was like, you got to do this. It's amazing. And when I was hitting these financial milestones, I was totally blown away. I still remember the first time I made over $8,000 in a month. I was like, my eyes were bugging out of my head. And I wanted to call people and be like, I just made $8,000. You can do it too. But most people would be like, thanks for bragging.
But you wanted to share it. You wanted to share it and have them have the same experience.
Yeah. Because I thought I'm talking about my day to day and how I don't have to work as much and how I don't have somebody micromanaging me or any of these kinds of things. But maybe other people are going to be really excited about a pay increase because it sure excited me. So I started kind of proselytizing amongst my friends. And what I kept hearing was, oh, well, we already have so many counselors in this city.
Yeah.
And I'd come from Athens, Georgia, which is a college town that churns out 3 different types of counselors every year. And so, yeah, it's a partly saturated market. And now I was in Seattle, which is another saturated market. And I was like, how can there not be enough clients for all of us?
Yes.
I'm turning people away every week. I'm, if somebody's not a good fit, I'm not taking them on because I would rather them have what they need than me try to fake it,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been this recurring theme in my life, but especially around business. It's there's plenty. And if we can just let go and release the fear and that scarcity, all of a sudden we realize how much is out there and how many people we can help in different ways.
Oh, I love that, Allison. How even that word saturated, I'm sure you and I both hear from therapists all the time who are like, well, I'm in a saturated market. And just they sound like a soggy sponge when they're talking about it, like a saturated sponge. And those places that are saturated with therapists are also so saturated with people who really value therapy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, those things tend to go together pretty much every time.
Yeah. Every time somebody says that to me, I'm like, yeah, I'm in a saturated market. Before they can say another word, I always go, good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an opportunity to really get clear on what you want to be doing, who you want to be working with.
Yeah.
What's your fee now?
My fee right now is $200.
Mm-hmm. What's the journey toward that been like?
Oh, it's been really interesting. So when I had my part-time practice in Athens, Georgia, I had this very diminutive sense of what I was worth. And part of that was working full time in an agency. And I also happened to be in an agency where, at least when I started, I was one of 2 master's level clinicians out of I think maybe 20 psychologists. So I also had this thing of I have to get my doctorate to be as good as. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting thing to be able to kind of release. I actually got accepted into a doctoral program around the same time my husband got accepted into his program. And we had to make a decision, but it was so clear that I was already doing what I wanted to do day to day. And his whole life and his income was going to change drastically if we went with his program. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Mine was all about ego. And his was actually about things shifting and changing in our lives. So that helped kind of put things into perspective, being at the crux of that choice. But when I started, I think I was charging $50 initially, which, I mean, the fact that that was 11 or 12 years ago doesn't really.
It doesn't make it the right number.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Seattle, I had raised it to 80 at some point in Athens. And when I moved to Seattle, I bumped it up to 125, which was this huge, like, I am taking this seriously. I'm moving to a big city. I'm going to do this.
What did that feel like when did that feel joyful or scary and joyful, or?
It felt really joyful. Somehow I got this confidence before we left of like, you know what? This is so doable. Like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to have a private practice and it's going to be great. And, of course, with that confidence comes some unrealistic expectations about how I was going to be full in this brand new city within 2 months or something, which, it didn't happen that way. But it did. I did end up filling up pretty quickly. And we moved to Asheville. And it didn't occur to me to give myself a raise for some reason. Like I was just kind of happy with 125 for years. And we moved to Asheville and we had to move quickly. My mother-in-law was sick. And so we didn't have the savings that I would have wanted to be able to go private pay initially. So I was like, okay, I'll just get on insurance panels real quick and that'll at least build me faster because we were going to have, rent. So I got on panels here, which were okay. Certainly not even 125. And then I got off of them, and within 3 months of having been off of them, I'd already raised my rate to 150, and then I bumped it up to 200. And that 150 to 200 leap actually came about as a part of a conversation in a Facebook group where I recognized that I'm going to raise it to 175, and then at some point I'm going to raise it up to 200. And like, why? Why do it incrementally like that? Is that about my anxiety? Is that about the market? What's that actually about? And I realized it was just straight up fear. And I'm really big at like running towards my fear now. Not that I enjoy it, but I find that both my businesses build so much faster when I run towards the thing I'm scared of.
Yeah.
And it just builds me up as a human being too, in a way that I feel so much more powerful than I ever have. So I was like, all right, we'll see how this 200 goes in this small city that has the highest cost of living and the lowest income in the whole state. We'll just try this and see how it goes. And it's gone great. So, I'm full. I've been full. I don't want anybody to call me right now. And yeah, so I'm pretty happy with it.
I mean, it's interesting. There's this sort of energetic thing that happens around a certain fee where, it'll be different for everybody, where like there's a fee that feels exciting and a little bit of a reach, a little bit scary. And, if we raise our fee to that number, whatever that number is, it's like there's a certain work that has to be done and that we can like kind of avoid by charging a little bit less than that. But in a certain way, you're doing the hard thing, but you're doing the thing that you're going to have to do anyway down the line.
Yeah. And one thing I talk to my folks about is like, what number makes you want to vomit? Like what number just feels like way too extravagant and how dare I and all of that. And then we kind of work backwards. And if like 200 makes them want to vomit, but 185 sounds okay, then I'm like, what's $15? What would it mean to just like breathe through it? And 185 is great. And so is 200. And I'm not going to judge your fee. It's your fee. And you have to be comfortable having it come out of your mouth. Yeah, it's interesting. And I had a great experience right after I'd raised my fees. I had like the stomach churning nervousness when I was getting calls around stating my new fee. Because I find for myself and most of my clients, I get okay with it in my head. And then time passes. And I say it out loud for the first time, and then I want to take it back and be like, just kidding. But if I say it out loud a few times, I just get super comfortable with it. And this woman called and said, like, I'd like to come see you. And I think I think I was full. And I said something like, oh, I'm full right now. I'd love to give you referrals. And she's like, well, do you have a waiting, or how much do you cost? And I said, I'm $200 a session. And she said, for 1 hour? And I was like, well, for 50 minutes. And there's this long pause. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
like I
this is
feel
bad.
awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she's like, well, do you have a waiting list? And I
Ooh.
was like, yes. Okay. I'm okay with this price forever. Like it'll go up in the future probably, but for now, I'm no longer nervous about it. So she kind of helped me get over my fear.
Yeah, it's interesting how physical it is that you've got to take the vomit step and then like let it get comfortable, and that you get so many signals from your body telling you when you've settled into a fee. Can you think of, in your whole entrepreneurial journey, has there been a big decision? I'm sure there have probably been a bunch, but has there been a big decision that might or might not have seemed big at the time that affected your entrepreneurial trajectory in a really big way?
That's such a good question. I think one of them was starting my Facebook group. I had just started Abundance, and I don't know where I heard about starting a Facebook group. It wasn't like the most popular thing to do at that time, and now it's fairly popular, I think. But I started it, and just like I'm social, so I really enjoyed engaging with people, and so it started growing and growing and growing. And I think it really helped me get to know a lot more about my clients, or maybe even the people who weren't able to afford to see me as, as a practice builder. It really, it showed me those folks' needs in a way that the people who were already like in a place where they were willing to invest and could invest or willing to prioritize investing, I feel like it gave me an insight into those other people who might not have that opportunity in the moment, or they weren't there mindset wise or whatever. And I think that's been really interesting. And I mean, the community right now, I think it's at like 6,100 people, like mostly really generous, loving, open, kind-hearted people. And I really love seeing them help one another. Like I'll go to answer a question and mid-typing, somebody says, something smarter than I would have, and I'm like, yeah, get it, like support one another. And I really love that community. And I think having business coaches myself is another thing that, like the first time I spent money on a business coach, I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so expensive. Like, how am I going to justify this? And then, fast forward a year later, and I'm literally spending like 10 times that amount a year on coaching, like to help propel me forward, because I'm clear that like, if I'm expecting other people to invest in improving their business, then it's not like I've got it all figured out business wise for myself. I need somebody to keep me moving along too. So yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when we invest in ourselves like that, I mean, of course we want to hire like an awesome coach, but even the investing in yourself like that, for me at least, it's always made a really big difference.
Yeah. I've never regretted it. I've never been like, oh, I shouldn't have spent that money on my own development.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't have challenged myself and grown so much. So another question for you, Allison, that I've been wondering about. So I'm a parent and you're a parent, and I'm wondering how you balance. I know there's no perfect way to do this, but how do you find that you balance your businesses with parenting?
It's hard. It's so hard. And I feel like I've just gotten out of this phase of like thinking this is too hard. Because I went through a little phase of that for a couple months where I just was burning myself out. One thing I do is I try to have really strict boundaries around like my screen time and my work time. So at 5:00, I don't have any work related anything on my phone. Like I don't have Facebook on my phone or my email or anything. And I try to keep my laptop in a totally different room or in my purse. So having those kind of boundaries and knowing that if something goes down in the Facebook group, it's not a clinical emergency. It's a practice building crisis, and that's okay. Like there are other people there to support people. And I also have amazing moderators who have my back, which I really appreciate. Yeah, I think there's that piece of it. And I've also found this trick that if I keep my phone in a different room from where I'm playing with my girls, because they're 1 and 4. So they're still they want a lot of engagement with me at this stage.
Yeah.
If I keep my phone in another room, I'm so much more engaged than if it's like over there dinging for like my personal text messages or my emails or whatever for like my personal email. If I can just like leave it in another room, I'm present. But when I bring that stupid thing into the playroom or whatever, I'm all of a sudden not as engaged. And we try to play outside a lot. So that's easier now that it's warmer and I can just leave my phone inside and we're sidewalk chalking it or playing at the water table or whatever. But I'm also not a natural kid person. I love my girls so much. And I think I'm a nurturer in a lot of ways, but I'm just not really a kid person.
What do you mean by that? That's so interesting. Do you mean like every minute of playing is not inherently super fun?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah, I'm like, me too.
Yeah, and I think that my comparative mommy stuff can come up with people who I do know who were just like natural parents who could like play in the dirt for 4 hours and be really satisfied. But for me to play in the dirt for 4 hours, I'm usually doing like business strategy in my head.
Yeah.
And being like, yeah, the fairy is pretty, So I feel like I'm kind of half engaged with that kind of thing because blocks don't really they're just not my thing.
Yes, it's not that fun for me either. The actual playing, like it's definitely like I envy those people who actually not just enjoy their kids, because of course like my kids are awesome, but the playing, like who just have that internal energy for it.
Yeah.
One thing that's really awesome is, so my kids are now 14 and 7. And so now they both like playing Monopoly and chess and like Mancala and all these different games that I actually genuinely love. So
nice.
Yes.
I'll look forward to that.
Oh my God, you're going to love it. And are there any difficult like parenting business moments that stand out to you where it's like, okay, I've figured out how to, or, I'm struggling with how to go this way instead of that way?
I think that there are times when I've realized like, if my time wasn't split and I could just do like the full on workaholic self that lurks inside me, I would probably have grown faster and farther. But I also am really clear that that's not like the balanced life I'd want to live, or that I would encourage my counseling clients or my practice building clients. So I think in some ways they keep me in check. I have had times during big launches when I launch a product like an e-course or something like that, that's usually a ton of work up front. And then 2 full weeks during like the launch cycle of like the pre-launch content and then the actual open cart for a week itself, where it's 2 full weeks of 12-hour days. And I don't think that that's good for anybody. But usually with that, I like, my computer's away from daycare pickup until the girls go to bed. And it's more like my time with my husband that's sacrificed. And so we try to like mitigate that with like, okay, well, this doesn't happen that often. And I'm actually changing my business model in a way I'm hoping I'll only have to do it one more time. But we usually just like watch a movie that he wants to watch that I don't really care about, but he wants my company. And I'll sit there and like answer the emails or the Facebook questions or whatever during that launch cycle and pretend to pay attention to whatever the new Star Wars is. So, yeah.
Oh, that's such a good hack. I love that.
Yeah, it's as long as like we're both really clear on what's happening. Because if I'm like, I'll watch this with you, and then he's like, why are you on your screen? Then it's a problem.
Yeah.
So this isn't watching, Allison. But otherwise, I try to keep those boundaries pretty rigid. And for me, like I've found I just have to, since I'm a systems person, like the areas in which I'm weak, if I can find a systematic hack for either creating boundaries around it or strengthening it or whatever, then I'm far more likely to improve in that area than if I'm like, oh, well, I just suck at this. So, yeah, I try to use systems as a means to getting where I want to be in life.
Interesting. And I think too about that issue of, all right, so if I wasn't a parent right now, I wouldn't be putting away the computer right now. I would be getting a lot more done. I'd create twice as much content and really making peace with. And this is what I chose. And having this boundary around my time probably actually has me getting a lot more done in the time I do have.
Mm-hmm.
Because when those are the hours that you have, you can really make use of them.
Absolutely.
So Allison, would you join me for a listener question?
Heck yeah.
This person, I'm just going to be curious what your take is on this question, not just answering it, but just kind of how you see the question.
Listener question.
So this person asked, until my private practice has enough clientele to keep me busy full time, other than becoming a supervisor in my field, what are some ways I could earn money?
So I have what might be a really controversial answer to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we'll have totally opposing views, which would be good because then people can choose what works for them. So I would say, I think this idea of like passive income and multiple streams of income, like they're really popular. They sound really great. And as somebody who has multiple streams of income, I can say, yeah, they're great. But I would say get one business going at a time and pretty much running itself in terms of referrals coming in and things like that before adding to your plate, because otherwise your energy just gets really like disparate and it's going to take you longer to get full. So what I'd actually recommend if you're needing to pull in a little bit more money would be to do something that is not clinical at all. So rather than getting like, an agency part-time job or, a contract position at a group practice or something, I would say like, what would be fun? So one thing I did in Seattle when I was in that stage, and it ended up not really bringing in money because I kept spending it there, is I got a part-time job at anthropology.
Ooh.
And yeah, you can see how I spent it all. But I also just kind of needed to keep myself busy outside of all my networking and waiting for clients to call. So that way I didn't burn out clinically, because that's one thing I got really clear on is my clinical sharpness was not where I wanted it to be when I was working full time and also had my part-time practice. Because I was seeing like 35 people a week, which obviously isn't ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I would say like, if you've ever had fantasies about being a barista, maybe go get a barista job. And then you also don't feel like, oh, it's so complicated to leave because you don't have a bunch of clients you're having to say goodbye to, or an agency who's like, you can't take your clients with you or whatever. Yeah, that's my potentially controversial answer.
I wish I disagreed with you because that would be really fun,
Yeah. We could fight about it.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I really agree that like this question had me wanting to ask the person a lot more questions, of course. Right. Like, what does it mean that they're not busy full time? And where are they in their practice building journey? But yeah, if they're toward the beginning and they're feeling like, they just need to get some income, I would totally agree with you that I think the time for starting multiple streams is not when you need money right away.
Uh-huh.
I mean, wouldn't it be cool if it did work that way, where you just are like, I made something, everyone's going to buy it. But it doesn't work that way. And we know that from experience.
Yeah, hard earned experience.
Yeah. I would agree. Like if you're at that place where, it's early on, yeah, do something else. Like I was an office manager for a while when I was an intern in private practice, and it was great. And I actually made more doing that than I did in my, well, that's a different story, in my private practice. Yeah, it really helped me not feel burned out, and it used other parts of me that, like the part of me that loves checking things off a list. But I would also ask this person, so what would it take for you to fill that practice? Would it be doing something like what Allison talked about of like meeting with 90 people in 90 days? Or is there like a push that you need to actually fill that practice? I would look at that first. Or is there maybe like a fee raise that needs to happen to help you bring in more money? But if not, like if that's not where you're at, then yeah, I would totally agree with you, Allison.
And that's a good point that like, I think sometimes people get excited when they first start their practice, and then they want to learn all the things, and then they get overwhelmed by hearing, the myriad of ways that you can build your practice and think that they might have to do them all instead of kind of going deep on a few. And that burnout happens, and then it feels like, well, if I do two things, it's going to be useless when those two things can make a world of difference in your practice.
Oh, God, that's so true. It could be that just those two things are the perfect medicine for your practice. I could talk to you all day. This is so fun.
I know.
So, Allison, where can people find you and throw compliments at you?
Well, they can find me at abundancepracticebuilding.com.
And remind people, what's the name of your podcast?
Oh, yeah. It's the Abundant Practice Podcast. And Annie's on it, so you get to hear her. And I think actually next week, as we're recording this, which will be probably before this one comes out. But yeah, it's a fun time.
It's super fun. And you get to hear a lot of different kinds of questions being answered. Thank you so much, Allison.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
Today's Snark Moment is about the lie that you can create passive income easily, like through an online course, let's say. You can do it. Easily is the part that's a lie. The internet is not a baby anymore. There was a moment where there weren't that many informational products available online. Some people made a lot of money by putting out stuff that wasn't very good. So I know you would never want to do that anyway. You'd never want to put something crappy out there to make money. The truth is, creating a leveraged online offer in 2017, or maybe you're listening to this in 2018, this will still be true. It takes a lot of work. It absolutely can be done, and I've helped therapists do it. I'm helping therapists do it right now. One key to creating a successful leveraged offer is something a mentor of mine, Tara Gentili, has said. People will pay for experiences, but not information. If you can create an experience or a process that gets a person from where they are now to where they want to be, they will pay you for it. There are a lot of ways to provide that kind of experience or process. Creating a leveraged offer usually has to start with one-on-one work or with small group work, and then grows from there. It takes starting small and working it out and discovering what works, and then building little by little on that. That's the truth. Thanks for listening. Ready to build a unique and profitable private practice? We can help you out. Our program, The Superpower Method for Therapists, happens twice a year. I work with a small number of private practice entrepreneurs for 3 months on finding and embracing your superpowers, clarifying your niche, and going step by step together to build your business. Head over to coachingwithannie.com and click on Superpower Method to sign up for the waitlist. Registration opens on August 14th. See you next week. Okay.
There we go.
So
yeah.
Would it help if I turned on my microphone?
Sometimes. I've done that like twice now.